Cool. So yeah, positive futures. Ours was sort of geared at figure out some positive examples of powerful AI being used for good. Rather because the doom scenarios seem to be a lot more thought out. Well thought out is debatable, but a lot more thought out nonetheless than a lot of the scenarios where it's used for good. And ideally, figure out a way where it's like, okay, how would this be implemented? Leading by example of using AI for good. So yeah, this was really just figure out the concrete examples. Came up with a lot of examples ranging from personalized AI assistants to defend you against scams and AI attacks in general. Also, ideas of using AI tools for corruption, AI tools for spotting sort of negative spirals within social media interactions, and sort of stop some sort of small tight-knit social media group for going a bit too far down some sort of unhealthy rabbit hole. And yeah, this sort of idea, that was really what we were kind of, and also thinking about like what are the kinds of emotions we would want to keep in like a post-scarcity future, and which ones would we want to avoid, and using that as like a mindset of like how would we improve a recommendation system like that. So yeah, there was a lot of brainstorming, and we did eventually like put together an actual, hang on, how do I scroll down on this? Oh, okay. Yeah, so how's it done today? Again, AI very centralized, and it's overwhelmingly enabling the attackers. So really the idea would be like, whether it be for cybersecurity or mental health, putting together your own sort of like personal, white hat, red team partner, or even someone who's just looking out for these sort of negative trends and can sort of advise on what to do next. And so what would really success look like? We were discussing the sort of, emotions that would happen in like a, sorry, I've never, oops.
Two fingers.
Okay, oh, right, two fingers. Yeah, we were discussing the sort of like far future, like, utopian, like, post-scarcity society, what emotions wouldn't, be around anymore. But of course the question is like, what can we do now? What can we achieve in like the near future? So I guess, yeah, a lot of that is really just like people having access to a system that's looking out for their well-being, even if it's just a proof of concept. A system that can warn people against certain types of scams while also discouraging from trying out those scams themselves. Kind of telling some people like, you aren't the only person being taught about how this works. And of course, any risks, there's whether it be stuff like the Waluigi effect, sort of persuading some large language model to act like it's almost like dark mirror self being way too easy. So that's actually the name, the Waluigi effect. AI safety researchers like to have fun. Yeah, there's definitely risks of it actually being almost like inverted and actually being used for some of these bad use cases. So in terms of advancing the safety enhancing aspects, this definitely it would be a matter of looking at sort of safer use cases for a lot of existing models, whether it be OpenAI or one of the Hugging Face models, and doing a lot of that before actually enhancing the capabilities in the model itself. Before like really like adding on additional tools or even something as simple as that. So yeah, so sort of like this sort of again, this was a mock-up. Again, we really sort of put together this plan toward the end when we realized that what the deliverable was supposed to be. So yeah, the idea is sort of like outreach. Two parts to it, basically a blog that's sort of discussing a lot of sort of thoughts we discussed, such as the ideas we discussed, such as AI systems that can sort of look at social media interactions, understand the dynamics that contribute to what were sort of termed honor cultures, integrity cultures, and victimhood cultures, and try to at least steer them away from the victimhood or the honor cultures, being sort of extreme, those being sort of extreme opposites of each other. But that sort of blog writing is relatively straightforward, and it's really just be a matter of just making sure that that's, the content is just widely distributed. For an actual like toy version of any of the AI systems we discussed, a lot of this would be kind of, using a lot of these publicly available large language models, whether it be behind an API or locally hosted. And a lot of this would be pretty similar to a lot of existing tools used for simulated user conversations. So taking some sort of, examples from one of these toxicity data sets of like a, one of the more unhealthy Reddit threads, or even an example of just like spam conversations, someone, falling for the kind of conversation that ends up in their like spam filter. And a lot of this is would really just be a matter of, repurposing a lot of the work that's already been done for like simulating users and seeing like, okay, you have a simulated user who's simulated to be sort of gullible, and you have a, basically a mock AI scammer. Can you also have the sort of third or fourth parties that are sort of examining this conversation and be able to intervene, talk to the user or like on the side and say, hey, this looks pretty sketchy for these reasons. And again, since this is mainly about making sure that these AI systems that are overwhelmingly being used by bad actors, making sure that they're being used by the good guys. This is really just like repurposing AI work that's already done. In fact, I've been literally working on a few projects just the past few months for a few clients that were just like this. And yeah, just going through a lot of different examples from very basic, like don't give your social security number to a Nigerian scammer, to even more advanced examples like random number just saying hello. They may just be trying to say that the number is valid. So even interacting just for amusement may not actually be more dangerous than you may realize. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, there we go. So yeah, how long would a proof of principle completion take? Again, similar work, usually would focus on full time. If there's a data set, usually takes about 2 to 4 weeks, assuming focusing on full time. Midterm, basically testing with a human user or human volunteer. So not just simulating these user interactions, but testing if how the simulated users actually, how well they behave like actual humans. Again, this is sort of a multi-agent setup. Next steps for if receiving funding. Again, blog posts doesn't really need funding for the actual like proof of principle project. This would really just involve putting together the proof of principle, and then once it's demonstrated, figure out how robust is it, and then how small can you make these sort of language models that are sort of looking out for a human. Can they be small enough to fit on a smartphone, while sort of retaining robustness against possibly like larger models. Yep, that was the sort of like everything we brainstormed. A very loose summary of everything we brainstormed. Again, we go in a full blog post, combined with sort of a more concrete project proposal.
Wonderful. Do you guys want to add anything to it? I saw that you have a bunch of other notes.
One of the prompts we thought about, we don't have time to discuss here, was what might enable this sort of post-scarcity reality with AI. So what would you do with a slightly better than scientific AI, or slightly better than human scientific AI, like an AI scientist? What sorts of projects you would have it do, essentially. So maybe that's a question if people want to think about.
Like a pasta.
Like what?
The pasta family.
Oh yeah. So like what sorts of projects? I'm not familiar with that one. So sorry.
But yeah, ideas for like rather than thinking about like figure out all sorts of creative ways in which the AI could kill us. Just like okay, if we did want to go things right, what are some like scenarios that are like the same level of detail as the doom scenarios, at least so we can at least imagine, work with something we can actually imagine when it comes to working with a positive outcome. Yep, that's it.
Before you go, questions, comments?
Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a mic. Have you guys looked at the Future of Life world building contest for AI?
I've heard of it. Haven't looked too closely at it.
It's really wonderful. They basically created like different world builds for I think 2045 of AI, and like you had to create a relatively stringent timeline for specific different technological developments, how they kind of like feed into AI development and AI feed into them, and then they came up with 2 stories of a life in that world. Plus like a rough description of like what that world looks like, an art piece, and like some kind of like audio footage. And it was good, relatively practical, and pragmatic and very interesting. So it was well done.
As a participant in this group, I found it interesting to just try to think positively. I think it's a lot easier to think negatively. So just like, what's something we can actually do with this tech that would help? And it doesn't have to be after the AGI arrives. It could be, now.
That was good. Okay. Thank you, guys. That was wonderful.